All right, Jose. Let's get started. Give me a second. So, I'm sorry. Right. Last week we got ourselves introduced into the database software. What exactly is a database? And we learned about the two types of databases, manual and computerized. And we also saw like the differences between the two of them, manual and computerized databases. And obviously, computerized databases hold more ground, and then we are capable of doing much more when it comes to the application of computerized databases. So we go along with that. So that's essentially why we go with these kinds of software, right? We learned about an important point called data redundancy. That is all about unwanted duplication of data, because that is a big problem when it comes to databases today. So you have unnecessary replication or the duplication of data items that leads to many different problems, data inconsistency, and then anomalies and all sorts of issues might come up. Uh, just because of having unnecessary copies of the same piece of data. We moved on to database management systems, what we call as DBMSs. So DBMSs generally allow us to easily interact with the database, to insert data, to change an existing piece of data, to retrieve data from database according to our specific criteria, and then of course to delete the data. So which it easily allows us, these kinds of software allow us to easily do that work without getting into a lot of technicality or the physical way or the physical approach into how the data is being stored and all that. We don't have to worry about it. We just have to know the necessary commands or the way to go on about the UI, and we should be able to do all of that interactions. Uh, we learned about a few examples, and we so that we're actually moving ahead with MS Access. And one other important thing, and we're basically moving along with something called relational databases. In reality, there are a few iterations of database software there. අපි මුලින්ම කියන එකට hierarchical database එක කියලා. So one of the first one is called hierarchical database, and then network model. And sorry, yeah. First one is actually flat file system, and then the hierarchical databases, network model, and then RDBMS, and then object RDBMS. So RDBMS is basically the industry standard when it comes to databases, right? So in a relational database, how we organize the data is like we gather the data into topical tables. According to different topics, we organize the data. And then we simply link between those tables so that we can create a connection and relate to those data, right? For example, we might have a table called class, and we might have a table called student. So students belongs to a class, and a class has students. So there is a relationship that goes between the two of them, right? We also saw how the database table structures are being created. I hope you all have copied down all the notes. I have shared with you the slides in a PDF format so you can copy down the notes onto your tute. And we learned about column in database, or RDBMS as we call it, as a fields. a row is known as a record. So when there might be a question asking like, how many uh, rows, rather columns, and not in those terms, fields and records are there in a table. So you should always refer to columns and then rows in that order, right? Yep. We learned about MS Access particularly. This particular, image kind of summarizes the entire, functionality of MS Access. So we use forms to insert the data into tables. And tables, as you were instructed, as you all know, is the most important component to database. That is where the data is being currently stored. From tables, we can directly send the data into producing reports, which is more intuitive, like rather than looking at a bunch of data in a table. If you can summarize, gather, and organize, sort according to your requirement, and then print it with your company logo and all the formatting into an A4 sheet, this is more presentable to a higher level management rather than just a bunch of technical data being produced in a very granular manner. So we need to be able to do that. So reports is the way to go. I'll teach you how we can do that. And then queries, Pute, we use queries to simply connect between tables and then simply pick the data according to our requirement, right? We learned about tables and data types is also quite important. Okay. A table is considered as the most important object of a database. So we learned about that last week. And usually a database may consist of one or more tables, depending on the level of details that needs to be stored. Now, in general practice today, what we try to do is we try to break off the tables into smaller tables as much as we can. So, for example, imagine an employee has multiple contact numbers. So rather than having just one employee table containing multiple columns for contact number one, contact number two, contact number three, it's more preferable to break it off into its own table called the contact table, right? So we try to break tables as much as we can, right? That's the general practice. Now, when it comes to constructing tables, we learn about something called data types, right? Each field must be assigned a data type to indicate the type of data and the constraints, rules that should be applied when entering the data into a table. Now, if you just look at this, there's a table called employee. You can see there is employee number, first name, last name, and the NIC number. Now, when you look at it, when you say employee number, it makes sense to us to store a numeric value into this. A phone number, thing, it's going to be all numeric, right? If it is an address, then obviously we have the house number or something, a numeric part is there, and then the street name, city name, town name, whatever. So like that's the text part. So it's actually a combination of text and numbers. Okay. And yeah, so NIC is also something similar. So there can be certain fields which are supposed to contain some a birth date or a joined date. So a date time sort of information might be there. Or there can be fields which contains a price or a monetary value. Mudal monahari sambandha deyak tiyena wenna puluwan. So you might have to contain a field, a data type, specify a data type to such a field which is more suitable for handling that kind of thing, right? So you have to always think about what type of data you're about to store into that field, and then to go along with that particular type of data type, right? So if you just look at this, these are the prominent data types that we come across. There are a few others as well. But we can see that there is something called number. It can be a whole number, it can be a fractional or a dot decimal value. Doesn't matter, you collectively consider that to be number. So if you want something to be calculated, if you want, I mean, if there's a possibility of a certain value being added to, or else like some form of a mathematical computation is being done onto it, then obviously you need to store it as a number, right? It can be a text, so there can be certain, now if you, even if you consider a phone number, you know that it starts with a normally a zero. And then also in the middle, some people have the practice of like, putting hyphens or dashes in between and then leaving spaces to make it more legible, to make it easy to read. You break the number into several parts, 2, 2, 3, 4, something like that. So you might have to have spaces in between. Now, numeric or number data type doesn't allow you to have spaces in between, or brackets or dashes, hyphens, even a front zero. In a decimal, sorry, in an integer number, you can't have a zero up front. So what it'll do is it'll immediately omit that off, right? So for those kinds of data types, you have to go along with text. Even a phone number. I mean, you don't necessarily do mathematical computations with your phone number, so basically it has to be that. Currency means, as I've told you, monetary values, date, time, and Boolean means for the whenever you have a type of data or a field which asks a yes no question or a true false question, then basically we have to go with Boolean, right? We just look at a few examples here. The same this thing is there in your tute as well. So now, yeah, if you have the tute printed, you can just mark it in front also. All right, so admission number, an example field data has been given 3457. What do you think uh, is the possible data type here? Admission number. You might have a situation where you might have to, let's say, filter out a certain set of numbers. All numbers that is between 3000 and 4000, or else like maybe to sort it in the ascending order. So in that case, numeric would be the way to go, since it's all numbers, no hyphens, nothing. So it would be number, ne? Data type එක number කියලා ගන්න. Field name, that would be employee name කියන එක. You can see S.D.F. Pereira. What would that be? That's also a text, right? Pudhe? Address, you can see number 34. Though there is a number, the rest of it is all text, right? So we have to go with text. Telephone number, as I've told you, it starts with a 0, and then there's a hyphen in between. And then you can see there's some spaces in between as well. So that also falls into the category of text. Date joined, it's a date time. So date and time, we combine it together. It's not just date. The data type is actually date / time කියලා ලියන්න ඕනේ. Amount paid, you can see it's a financial value, it's a monetary value, so you have to go with currency. In currency, you can actually specify according to regional settings. Yeah, by default, no. If not, you have to specify it, and then here it's rupees කියලා දාලා තියෙනවා. So license plate, you can see it's like a license plate number or else a vehicle number. So you have spaces in between, you have numbers and letters both, so it's a text. Is member, it's a question, so it can be either yes or no. So you have to go with Boolean. නැත්නම් yes/no කියලා කිව්වත් කමක් නැහැ. They are all accepted. Debt ID ACCL2. So you can see letters and numbers, so that would be a text, right? Now let's quickly create a database table. So what we do is you open up. I actually opened Access. Give me a second. Let me just start from scratch, right? So all right, so starts and hold on. Okay, start gear, and then I access and just click on it. Takes a bit of time. And in access for the, unlike in other software, you have to save your database upfront. Something has gone on, I guess. All right, so in other software, you can do your work halfway through and then you realize you haven't saved it and save it. But in this case, you need to save your database name and all that location upfront. So once you do, and thereafter, minor changes as and when you go, creating tables and all that, you can save it on the fly, because it actually asks you before you proceed on, you have to save this. So you do have to save those components. And yeah, that's how it works, right? Something is wrong, I guess. Give me just a second.
So we can't hear you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I muted myself. So give me a second. Hi. So yeah, what I was saying, like, while I was muted, yeah. So what I said was, in other software, you can basically do your work and then save afterwards, right? But in this case, we have to save it up front. So as what I'm doing right now, I have to select a location and create the name, and then I'm going to go with yeah, okay. So you can see database and the extension is like kind of important. Make ACCDB කියලා. That means access database කියන එක තමයි ඔය කියන්නේ. So I'm going to click on create. So I'm here. Right, so the database is now the outer frame is now created. Now we need to create the individual components. Now last week, if you all can remember, we did something related to a library, right? So library එකක data components ටිකක් අපි පොඩ්ඩක් define කරා. Let me just hold on. I didn't do this with you, but due to the time factor, I'm going to quickly pull out something that I did with another class. හරි මෙන්න මේක බලන්නකො. Now, my intention is to create a library database, a database for a library. The main tables that I've identified so far is like we have the book table, and we have the author table, and we have the member table. Okay. Book table එකේ තියෙනවා පුතේ book ID. It's like your admission number, something, a number, like a particular number to identify the books with. Now, why can't we go with something like the ISBN number, because the barcode is already printed, no worries and all that? True, but the thing is, ISBN, say for example, if you buy several copies of a particular book, let's say Model Duo කියලා. So if you buy 5 copies of Model Duo, because you might have to have multiple copies of the same book in the library, in which case, like you will not be, I mean, the ISBN is going to be duplicated. And you cannot have like your primary key, or what you call as the identifying fields or unique field or key fields duplicated. හරි duplicate වෙන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා අපිට වෙනමම number එකක් දෙන්න වෙනවා just for our reference in order to proceed with this. So in each table you need to have some form of an ID or a identification, something, so that we can uniquely identify each of the book or the author or the member uniquely, right? So this is what I went along with. Book ID එක තියෙනවා, title is the name of the book, author ID. Author ID. So this is interesting because we're not giving the author name. For example, මෙතන model දුව කියලා දාලා, we don't necessarily put Martin Vikramasinghe because of the lack of time. I have to proceed with this. නැත්තම් මේක දාලා ඔයගලන්ට එහෙම වෙන්නේ වෙද්දී ප්‍රශ්න මොනවද කියලා I can tell you that. But rather, let's go with author ID, right? එතකොට ඒක අපි refer කරන. This actually connects to the author ID in the author table, right? ISBN is the unique number that we get. Added date so that I can have a date time. And category is called a lookup. So lookup means it's like it gives you something called a combo box or a drop down menu, out of which you can select the proper one, or else whatever you feel like the book category, the book belongs, the category to which the book belongs to. You can select it from there. Author table it's quite simple. Author ID, author name, and the country of that author. So yeah, member table, I've not gone with all the details. So let's just, try to worry about one at a time. So let's create the book table. Now, how we do this is this way over there. So make the recording available for all. You can leisurely go through and, create your own tables. Make a method, once you get to the home, I didn't do anything. It's just simply, once you save it, it comes as it is, right? So if you go to the left top corner, you have this. Methana podda icon එක චුට්ටක් වෙනස් වෙලා තියෙන. This is all like very line drawing-ish, like, when you come to the later versions of Microsoft Office. So if you click on this, it goes on to the design mode. සාමාන්‍ය මෙතන set square එකයි rule එකක් pencil එකකුත් තිබ්බා කලින් අය කියන්නේ වල. So what it does is it allows you to draw a table. Now, what data ලියන්න කලින් table එක what you draw is, if I ask you in class like to draw a table, so what you do is first you draw the table, right? Pencil එකකුයි rule එකකුයි අරගෙන ඒක draw කරන columns එකෙන් කරලා එහෙම. So this is that table creation phase, right? So I need to give a name for my table. I'm going to call it book table. A table let's call it book, right? And then say okay. So I get to this point. Doesn't necessarily look like a table, but it gives me fields, which are the column names, right? මෙතන මේ පොඩි අතුරක් වගේ එකක් තියෙනවා. I'll tell you what that is later on. I'm just gonna make it book ID. And then what they have given us by default as the data type is auto number. I'm going to click and change that to number. Okay. Auto number කියලා කියන පුතේ auto incrementing number එකක්. That is, if you like, it starts off with 1, as and when you go record enter කරන්න it will say 2 3 4 5 කියලා හදාගෙන and you don't have to do anything to it, right? It's good for things like, invoice numbers and, transaction tracking IDs or something. But for a book, let's keep it a bit more controlled, right? And okay, book ID. So, and then title කියලා එකක් තිබ්බා. Title letter now here in like I think 2010 onwards, 13 onwards, they started calling it short text. Text එක short text කියලා කිව්වා. And there is of course a long text as well, right? Short text by default gives you about 255 characters. Right? අපිට අකුරු 255ක් වගේ තමයි දාන්න පුළුවන් for title and name of books. That would be fine, right? But if you want to go for longer texts and all that, අපි හිතමු description එකක්, synopsis එකක්, නැත්නම් review එකක් of a book, then we have to go with long text, right? Which actually gives us මෙතන limit එකක් දීලා නැහැ. Normally gives us about 65,000 characters, but let's say it's more, right? In simple terms, it's more characters. Short text is fine for us, and we have to go with author ID, right? Yes, author ID. Let's go with that. And that, of course, I'm going to make it number because that has to match with the other table value that I'm going to create. තාම හදලා නැහැ. Author table එකේ author ID එකත් එක්ක match වෙන්න ඕන. Go with number for that. ISBN, of course, a number, 13-digit code. ඊළඟට added date, නැත්නම් date added කියලා. මේ book එක library එකට අපි දැම්මේ කවද්ද කියන එක. So that's a date, right? එතකොට if you drop down, like select the data type, can see it doesn't have just a date field. It has a date time data type, right? And we have category as well. Category එකට මම දැම්මේ පුතේ lookup කියලා එකක්. So what exactly is a lookup? You can click on this drop down එකේ පල්ලෙහාම තියෙන lookup wizard කියලා එකක්. So when you click on the lookup wizard, what happens is it brings you to a wizard. Wizard කියලා කියන්නේ it sort of takes you through like, step by step, so that you can easily create something, that is generally known as a wizard. All right, so here there are two options. I want the lookup field to get the values from another table or query. This is the first ever table that we're creating, so we don't have such a table. So I will type in the values that I want. So I'm going to click on next. And this is, see, this is about category, right? So to which category a particular book belongs to. I'm going to just go along with some default ones. Novel, cursor. Back, down arrow, you move to the next value. Let's say fiction, science fiction. We can go with literature. Say education. That's enough. Click on next. And yeah, the label for the field is category. That's fine. මෙතන මේ check එකක් තියෙනවා limit to list කියලා. If I click on that, it doesn't allow me to enter my own category, right? While I'm entering the data. So it won't allow me to, like, you have to select something from the given list. මම මෙතන ඒක check එක දාන්න නැතුව ඉන්නම්. That means, like, during the data entry process, suppose like there is some other category, you can actually type it and give it, right? Allow multiple values. Let's not go for that complication. So let's just finish this off. And then, though I've gone with the lookup wizard, it finally ended up as a short text. The reason for that is, if I go to this new field or the column called tab called lookup, you can see මෙතන row source එක අර මම type කරපුවා ටික it's methodically being entered within quotes separated by semicolons. You can actually do it. If you want to add a new category, මෙතනටත් ඕනනම් type කරලා add කරන්නත් පුළුවන්. That of course is also possible. But let's just keep it as it is. The make on a table එක අපි හැදුවා. Now you can see this icon has changed. Right? It used to be a set square and a ruler or something. But now it's become a table, right? So this is actually called the data sheet view. Make a palla click or thing. You can see there are two modes when it comes to tables. One is called the design view. The other one is called the data sheet view. So we are currently in the design views. Therefore, like, it's a toggle button. So you can switch between design view and like data sheet view. So once you're done with this, you can simply click on this icon to move on to the data sheet view. And it asks you whether to save it. Yes. All right. So this is the data entry point. Make a table. Earlier on, the view is about constructing, defining parameters of a table. Then data right? So just put in a few books. Help just send me your favorite books along with your authors. So I'm go with something very simple. Author ID, I'm gonna go with, let's say, 2000. I'm gonna hopefully put Martin Ingram Singh as right. Wait, so I'm just gonna go with some numbers, right? Date added, let's make it last month terms. Category, you can see now it's a drop down. Click on this, you can select from here, right? So I'm just gonna go with literature. It's fiction also, I guess. Right. මෙතන click to add කියලා තව column එකක් ඕනේ නම් add කරන්න පුළුවන් පොතේ, but for the time being, let's keep it that way. Let's have another one. But you can't have the same number. See, මේක දාලා මම enter කරන්න try. Like, if I sort of proceed on, just take Peter Jackson. Again, like Rick Roden, right? Let's put him as 3001. I'll have to refer to it later on. Previous dates. Fiction. See, now if I try to move on to the next field, it says the changes requested to the table were not successful because they would create a duplicate values in the index, primary key, or relationship. change the data in the field or fields that contains duplicate data, remove the index, or redefine the index to permit duplicate entries and try again. So it says like, I can't have the same book ID duplicated. 1,000 kila dekak tiyenna bෑ. So I'm just gonna change this to 1,001. So now if I click here, no worries, no errors, nothing. Okay, great. Okay. So I'll go with another one. 1,000. Let's make it 2. Goosebumps. RL Stein. So yeah, okay. Just have to keep track of these people later on. I might need help from you later. I'm going with some numbers. Ek api damu ටිකක් towards the end of 20th again. Fiction. Okay. 1,003. Just one more. Okay, Harry Potter. There are 7 books, so I'm gonna go with and sorcerers. Might be butchering the name. So Stone. It's probably a bad term, I guess. Let's try that. SORCERER. SORCERER. Okay. Okay. Goosebumps, let's call it 250. So really that many books? Is that an interesting series? Like, I have never read it. Wow, nice. I'll give it a chance, but with all my work, what I'm doing now, I'm not sure if I can, but I'll try. All right, so it's again fiction. Okay, I think. Right, so we have about 4 books. I think yep, let's so this is it, right? So we table we designed one and we fill some data. So let's quickly create another table. Oops, go to okay. Now, if you want to create a new table or new component, when it comes to access databases, we can actually create any of these 4 components. We can create tables. That's your baseline. That's your first thing that you should do. Based on the tables, you can create queries. And again, based on the tables, you can create forms. And based on the tables, you can create, based on queries and tables, you can create reports. Dependence though we start with inserting forms the forms are just a UI element which allows us to insert data in a more convenient manner. The මෙහෙම අපි data enter කරන්න කියලා කාටවත් කියන්නේ because we have to give them a user interface, right? Somewhat like methodically put field එකයි ඉස්සරහට type කරන්න පුළුවන් place එකක් එක්ක. That's a form. So ඒක හදන්න කලින් අපි tables හදාගෙන ඉන්න ඕනේ. So the next thing, if you go to the create tab here, you all can see there are 4 sections exactly aligning with the 4 components that we saw. Table කියලා set එකක් තියෙනවා අපිට. Queries කියලා set එකක් තියෙනවා. And then we have forms and then reports, right? If you go to table design, අලුතෙන් එකක් plus sign එකක් තියෙන. So I'm going to create the author table. We have author ID, author name, and country. Okay. Author ID. That would be a number. Author name. That's a short text. See, I'm using something known as Pascal casing here, right? Where like you have camel casing. There's a slight difference between camel casing and Pascal casing. You can see like, all of the first letters of each word is capitalized, right? I'm not leaving any space. Now, leaving a space in Access is not a big deal, but when it comes to other DBMSs, like it's a technical error. You are not allowed to leave spaces. You either have to leave a space as an underscore, in which case it's actually called snake case, right? But either or this one, or else like you go with capitalizing each letter, each first letter of each word, so that it's more legible. I can අපිට ඉක්මනට කියව ගන්න පුළුවන්. If I just went along with this, like you will find it a little bit difficult to break or find the break as to මේක ඇත්තටම read කරන්න කොහොමද මේක ලියන්න කියලා නැත්නම් it's going to be a little bit difficult to read. So for that purpose, we are going to simply capitalize the first letters of each word. That's how we do it, right? And then country, it's also short text. You don't have to create a drop down menu like creating all the countries in the world. That's not a viable thing. Api type karana them. So we can actually when it comes to advanced system development, you can obviously import the list of countries from a CDN or a content distribution network. But obviously for this purpose make a copy short text at the type current long way. All good. There's one more thing that we have to do. We need to define that the author ID is the Yatura thing, right? So it's called the primary key. You can click on this button here once it's selected, and it sort of drops this key thingy over here, right? Keep in mind we have not saved this. So we make a save karan. So let's go to the save button, or else even if we try to move on to the datasheet view, this is the design view. Datasheet view it asks you to save it first. So I'm going to say yes. Call it author, and then say okay. Right, so we have two tables. We'll just try to create before we forget the people who wrote the books. There were four, right? So is this key like the key in Python dictionaries? Yes. I mean, it allows you to uniquely identify the record. අපිට මේ පේලියෙන් එක එක වෙන් කරගන්න පුළුවන් පුතේ මෙහෙම ගත්තා. Imagine twins are the identical twins who are in the same class, whose names start with A and then the last name is Pereira. So initials and the surname ලියුවොත් එමේ A Pereira දෙන්නම A Pereira. Birth marks උත් මොකුත් එහෙම නැහැ එකෙක් ගෙවත්. තියනවා කියලා තමයි if you don't see the person, then how are you to differentiate between the two of them? If they're both in the same class doing the same subjects and all that are the same, and obviously gather address එකයි phone numbers ඔක්කොම එකයිනේ. So in which case, how do you differentiate? It's using your admission number. So the two guys will be having two different admission numbers, right? Data wise, we can say the one of them is 8950 and the other guy is 8952, right? So that's how you differentiate between the two of them. Okay. So that's what the IDs are, but the primary keys allow you to differentiate between the two. Not to basically uniquely identify the records. Great. Api authors la tika tag gala dagana. So we have author ID 2000. That would be M Vikramasinghe. Not topic full ekada. Sri Lanka. Okay, and then we have Percy Jackson. What was the ID? 3001. Who wrote Percy Jackson? Rick Riordan. US. Okay. Who's the other guy? Goosebumps. 3002. It's American, US, sorry, UK, what? American, okay. US then. One more Harry Potter. It's 3003 here. JK Rowling's United Kingdom. All right, so we have the four people listed down. It's all good. හරි දැන් අපි මේ දෙක හදලා තියෙන පුතේ. So if you go to uh, the theory part once again, we drop ourselves into something called key attributes. Now, as I've told you, I mean, we were talking about primary keys and how keys work in terms of being able to uniquely identify the record. Now, we say that any fields which is unique, or it might actually be a combination of fields also. If it is unique, if the combination is unique, we call it a candidate key, right? For example, අපි මෙතන table එකට ගියොත්, just look at the employee table today. In the employee table, you all can see employee number, though it's bolded, that's actually the primary key. අපි ඒක දැනට පොඩ්ඩක් අමතක කරලා just say employee number. Nobody in their right minds in a company would assign two people the same employee number, right? එතකොට employee number එක unique වෙන්න ඕන, right? So it's gonna be unique, as in like no duplicates. There won't be another person called 067 other than Saman Pereira. Okay. Likewise, it's gonna be unique. Also, NIC, the national identity card number, is also a unique value. It normally starts with nowadays අපි අලුතෙන් දෙන IDs වල it starts with 1997 ඔහොම තමයි start වෙන්නේ. So the earlier ones, they were just the last two digits were there, and altogether 10 digits. Nowadays I think it's about 13, and it included the V. So again, NICs are unique. ඒක duplicate වෙන්නේ නැහැ කාගේවත්. And then here, just imagine we don't have that many number of employees. If you couple up the first name and the last name together, may then now merge thing. මෙතනත් uniqueness එකක් තියෙනවා. So Saman, there can be a few Samans. There can be multiple Pereiras also. But Saman Pereira together, if you combine them together, we call it, I mean, there can be uniqueness. එතකොට මේකට අපි කියනවා පුතේ මෙහෙම එකක් තිබ්බොත් ඒකත් අපිට primary key නැත්නම් candidate key විදිහට ගන්න පුළුවන්. So as a result, you get a few options: employee number, NIC, contact ID can in the next table, right? And then first name and last name combination. All of these are possible candidate keys, which are suitable to be, I mean, they don't have duplicates. That's the only, characteristic of candidate keys. Out of them, we have to select one. The most suitable one is known as the primary key. A field or a set of fields, same thing, that is selected. That is the differentiator between a candidate key and the primary key. Candidates like qualified, out of which we select the best person to the job, right? I mean, for the job, so or else the assignment or whatever. So that's basically what the primary key is. So you select amongst the candidates to simply go along with being able to uniquely identify the record. හරි එතකොට employee table එකේ we have selected employee number. Contact table එකේ only contact ID was there, so we take it as the primary key. But for the others, when it comes to the other fields which are which are not selected as the primary key, candidates but not selected as the primary key, we call them as alternate keys, or sometimes called secondary keys also. Which are not selected as the primary key. For example, උඩ table එකේ NIC තිබ්බ පුතේ, if you can remember, and first name last name combination was there. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ව තෝරගත්ත නැති primary keys අපි කියනවා alternate keys නැත්නම් secondary keys කියලා. Great. And then we have something called a foreign key. Before that, if you go to the composite key, we call it the compound key also. I told you the first name last name combination, if you plug them together, if you merge them together, that also forms a uniqueness, right? So if you have to or if you try to merge or take two or more fields together to form up your primary key or the candidate keys, we call it a composite key. හරි තනි field එකක් තමයි ideal, but in some cases we might not have it because all values are having duplicates. එක හැම column එකකම duplicate items තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට තනි field එකකින් uniqueness එකක් form කරන්න බෑ. In which case you might have to go with composite keys. Right? And now before moving on to foreign keys, can you see that the employee table and the contact table both has a common field? Right, you can see that employee number in the employee table and is basically being placed in the employee number, sorry, in the contact table as well as the employee number, so that we can relate to these two tables. Okay, what's the purpose of this? Okay, how does it actually connect the two tables? Now suppose if I wanted to find out Mr. Saman Pereira's phone number. මොකක්ද අපේ usual approach එක පුතේ? Not see. Okay, fine. It's working. Is the pen working? All right, it's working. No, there was a bit of an issue somewhat earlier. Seems to be working. It's fine. All right. So if someone, Mr. Saman Pereira's phone number is to be searched, through the database, then what we do is we look up based on the name of the person. අපි කරන්නේ මේ සමන් පෙරේරා කියලා name එක insert කරලා we are simply pointing at to the employee number of that person. Give me 1 second, buddy. Then. Right, sorry for that. All right, so what I was talking about, yes, based on the name Saman Pereira, we can look up the employee number. එතකොට 067 කියන employee number එක අපි හොයාගන්න. හරි. And what we do is based on that employee number, we can now search if you have made the proper connection onto the employee number field of the contact table. අපි කරන්න පුතේ එතකොට 067 එකත් එක්ක match කරනවා මේකේ තියෙන හැම field එකක්ම, right? So now you basically match with this fellow and this one. හරි එතකොට record දෙකක් තියෙනවා which matches with the employee number of Mr. Saman Pereira. එතකොට මේක ඉස්සරහට ගත්තොත් you can see we're capable of pointing at the two phone numbers. එතකොට these will be produced as the results based on the query. දැන් මම ඇත්තටම මෙතන කරේ something called a query, right? So there is something called vertical lookups and horizontal lookups. That's too much for you. But අපි query එකක් ලියනවා කියලා කියන්නේ මම මෙහෙම එකක් පුතේ. We are processing, we are searching the database to find out the relevant information. දැන් අපි fingerprint එකක් අපි දැම්මොතින් machine එකක the fingerprint is stored by a certain employee number. So a database again, there are so many fingerprints there, and it will quickly match, graphically match your fingerprint with the set database. ඊට පස්සේ database එකෙන් look up කරනවා ඔයාගේ ID එක, and the database will then check whether you have access to that particular server room or whatever it is. So just because your fingerprint is recorded doesn't mean that there can be certain restricted areas for people who do have fingerprints. You might not be granted access. ඒක එතකොට look up කරන්න පුතේ database එකේ. මෙන්න මේ වගේම තමයි. All right. So even if you look at the QR codes or the barcodes read at supermarkets, same concept, right? A number is being picked up from the barcode, and that number will be looked up in the database, product details database. It was එතනින් pick කරලා ඒකේ price එක item name එක pick කරලා මොකද interface එකට load කරනවා. That's how it works, right? So I need you all to just simply copy this down, and then if I go through the foreign key field, this is super important, right? It says a primary key of a table is placed in another table. See, මෙතන ගත්තු thing, the employee number is the primary key of the employee table, right? So the primary key of the employee table is placed in the contact table so that we can relate the phone numbers to each of the employees to build a relationship between the two tables, right? So what is known as a foreign key is this fellow. හරි මෙයාට තමයි අපි කියන්නේ foreign key එකක් කියලා. මේක තමයි අපේ primary key එක. Right? See, so it's always a primary key foreign key relationship එකක් තමයි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් තියෙන්නේ. All right? Yeah. So the relationship අපි පොඩ්ඩක් මෙතනින් මම ඉවර කරන්න. Hold on. But the contact table primary key is not the employee number. No, it's not, because it's duplicating everything. It's a good question, because you can't have employee number to be the primary key because it has duplicates. What we established earlier was the contact ID to be the primary key here. මෙයාගේ primary key එක මේක. All good?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Hari, now since we were just talking about relationships, what we call as a relationship is a meaningful association between two tables, right? ඇත්තටම කිව්වොත් it's not the tables that are being related to, it's the fields that are being related to, right? But anyways, like as a definition for you all to remember and write whenever you are being asked the question, you have to remember the first line, right? So what we do in terms of relationships in a relational database is that we place a common field in both tables. Tables දෙකේම common field එකකින් තමයි common attribute එකකින් තමයි අපි relate කරන්නේ, right? So we learn about three kinds of relationships called one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. And we'll go through one of them, like each of them later on. So please copy down the notes, and I might give you some additional stuff, like, as and when we go. For the time being, let's wind up for the day. අපි අනිත් දවසම ඔයගලන්ට කියන්නම් පුතේ, even on a weekend or something, like we'll try to cover this up. Yeah, so I'm not sure about the status of my replacement. I'm also going tomorrow just to interview a few people. So hopefully, like, we'll be able to find someone better than I am. So let's see how it works, right? Hopefully, like, it'll work out. Right, so until we meet again today, take care everyone, stay safe, have a pleasant rest of the week. God bless you, Pate.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir. God bless.
I'll be doing
Okay,
so.
God bless.
Okay, Pate. God bless you.